It's Q&A time again. There have been an awful lot of questions submitted this time, which is brilliant. Hello Rosie, can an established rhododendron grow in pots? Is it a good idea to dig the one I have in my garden now that we are approaching spring, or should I wait until autumn? I can see some buds forming, but I'm not sure if that will upset the plant. I believe plants prefer acidic soil, which I believe mine isn't. I want to relocate it in a pot. Thank you, from Wiltshire. So one thing I would say is that if your rhododendron is actually growing perfectly well in your garden and it's not showing any signs of yellow leaves, then it's probably quite happy there. However, you could do a soil test and actually find out whether you've got alkaline or acidic soil. There is no point in trying and make your alkaline soil more acidic, in which case it is better to lift the plant. But in the spring is not the right time. You want to prepare it. Once it has finished flowering, you can then start digging around the outside, giving it a large amount of space that you're just cutting down around the roots, backfilling that with compost, because that will just give it a little bit of a shock. Make sure you water it and it doesn't get dry through the summer. And then the autumn, that is when you want to be lifting it, taking a large root ball, not a small root ball, a large root ball, digging it up, putting it into a container. It will settle over the winter months and then be fine in that container. Give it a reasonable size container and get some good ericaceous compost to put the plant into, and that way it will work. Hi Rosie, I have bought a few 9cm pots of Tracheostemon jasminoides, star jasmine, repotted into 1 litre, good compost, kept in a cold greenhouse over winter. Can't see any new growth on these at all. Should I keep them under cover, pot them on, or put them outside? Well, at the moment, if you're here in the UK, because you don't say where you are, and you've still got frosts coming, then no, do not take them outside. Leave them in their 1 litre pots for the time being. Wait until probably mid-end of April, and by then you should see whether there is actually any growth coming on those. It's not worth potting them up or putting them outside, because at the moment that might kill them anyway. So be a little bit more patient. Keep them in the containers they are in. Make sure that they're not too well watered, because if you've gone and overwatered them through the winter, they will not have liked that. But once we get a bit of warmth into both the pots and in the air and a bit of light coming through, you should see growth coming on. Let's hope they are still alive for you. Hello Rosie, my Gaura lindheimeri pink cloud looks like a dead stick right now. Have I lost it? It's a lovely plant. Where should I be doing and what should I be looking for? I'm in zone 8B and also my Mexican sagebush. Right, so with Gaura or Ernothera, they regrow from below ground level, so the dead stick growth that you are seeing is not going to regrow. So you need to cut that down, cut it down to about 1 inch, 3-4 centimetres from ground level, and just wait. You've just got to be patient. They don't regrow into growth until probably mid-May, and that's when you will start to see them starting to regrow from the bottom. So patience, please. They're not something that comes up early, because they flower right the way through the summer, right the way into the autumn, sometimes into October. They've got to have a rest, and that rest period continues right the way through the winter months, early spring, and then it is May time that you'll see them regrowing. Now with the sage, if it's looking like dead sticks, look along the base of the growth and see whether you can see any nodes, which are little bumps on the actual plant itself, and usually you would cut those back middle to end of March right the way down, so you're cutting them back to around about 6 inches, 20 centimetres, all of the big growth, and you will see again they will come from below ground level but also start to regrow on the old wood also, whereas the Gaura does not regrow on the old wood. So that's the difference between the two. Hello Rosie, I have a very general question. What plants in the garden would you recommend to bring in the largest variety of birds and beneficial insects? Well, anything that is flowering and produces fruit is going to be good for everything that you're wanting to bring in. So what I would recommend is early and late flowering shrubs. Really helpful, because they will give you that early season and late. So your early season ones, Something that produces berries as well, that is always good because you'll get the birds coming in to feed over the winter months as well. So that works really nicely. A good mixture of different sizes and shapes of flowers. So things that are low growing, tall, daisies, plants with hooded leaves, so like Lamiums, that family, so the Nepetas and all of those. You need all of these different styles of flowering plants in the garden because not all insects want a big daisy to go and land on. Some of them want to go and hide in the tubes. So plants with tubular flowers, plants with open flowers, a good mixture and a good mixture of colour range as well will really help. I have a large old variegated euonymus and a third of the branches have reverted to green. If I take cuttings from the variegated plants, are they likely to revert too? Thank you. So once one of these plants starts to revert and you haven't taken remedial action by cutting out the green, it is now a slow process of where it will completely turn to being a green plant. If you're taking cuttings from the variegated parts of the plant, that is absolutely fine. They should stay variegated, but only for a certain length of time, because if your plant is one that will revert, then even variegated cuttings will eventually revert. So you will have it staying variegated, say, for about 5 years, and then it will start to put on green bits. So just be aware that it can then start to revert after that, but you will initially get a variegated plant from those cuttings. Hi Rosie, can you recommend perennial flowers which are easy to grow for pots and which flower over a long period? Something that will bring joy for many months. I have a small courtyard garden that I want to incorporate a selection of terracotta planters. Thank you. There are lots and lots of herbaceous perennials that flower for a long period that you can utilise and put in there. It will depend on whether you want a riot of colour or you want specific colour regime for what your planters. So things that I've picked out which are good: Coreopsis verticillata Zagreb, really lovely, flowers for a long period. A lot of the hardy geraniums, especially the new varieties, you can choose from those. Either shorter ones or taller ones will work really well. Echinacea varieties, they will flower right the way on through the summer and give you a long period. And again, you can have tall or shorter ones. And then you've got taller plants which flower and flower and flower, such as Gaura, which is now known as Oenothera. Heucherellas work really well, and you can have a choice of leaf colour and flower colour on those. And grasses work really well, giving you movement and later on a bit of flower head in there. So hopefully that helps you. That gives you a few things that like the sun and a few things that like the shade, because you haven't said what sort of area they would be growing in. Hi, can you recommend small trees for a little garden and ones for pots that are winter hardy? Thank you. The majority of trees that you buy should be winter hardy. Things that look good in containers are things like Amelanchier, Malus transitoria. Those are two favourites of mine because not only do you get flower on those, you get berry on them as well. They are prunable, so therefore you can keep them going quite nicely. If you want something slightly smaller, then you might be looking at something like an Osmanthus, and then that would be evergreen. So hopefully those give you a few ideas of things that you can grow in containers. Hi Rosie, took some lovely Salvia Amistad cuttings late last summer. I've noticed the foliage has dropped off, but notice they do have roots. Should I pot them up individually now, and when should I plant them out? So as long as they've got good white roots on them, it is absolutely what they would do is drop the leaves because they are a deciduous plant. You should see green growth, or the stems are actually green, which will be lovely, and you will be getting shoots off those a little bit later. I would say wait a little bit before you pot them up into individual pots. Just wait until about April because they're a late season salvia, so wait until then. You'll then be able to see which ones are sending off shoots and you can pot them up, and that way you can throw away any that are rotten and you don't waste your time potting up everything that's there. So pot them up end of April, beginning of May, and then probably end of May, they will be ready for you to plant them out in the garden. And by that time, the last of the frosts should have dispersed and they will be quite happy going outside. This one is from somebody who is in Houston, Texas, and they are zone 9B. They don't get any chill nights or anything at all like that, and a really high temperature, and I'm presuming very high humidity for around about 2 to 3 months of the year, and wanting to grow epimediums. Now, there are epimediums that come from areas of Asia and places like that which have similar conditions to what you have in Texas. Now, whether or not they're available for you is another thing, but I have just given you 1 or 2 ideas of the species that you should be looking for, but even in your conditions they will still want a bit of shade. They will not be happy in full sun. So there is Epimedium acuminatum, Epimedium davidii, Epimedium dolichostemon, Epimedium macranthum, Epimedium stellulatum, and then one which is a cultivar, Epimedium spine Tingler. I would suggest trying those varieties if you can get hold of them. Plants for poor soil, I'm working on amending it, but it's going to take some time. I'm trying some lupins there and other places, as someone suggested, a chop and drop. It's also dry shade and I'm in zone 6. We'll try some annuals and cosmos, but prefer perennials. Okay, so you are in a temperate area, and it looks as though it goes down to about -17, -18 centigrade, which is a lot colder than we get here in the UK. I think the best solution for you to start off with, this is what I tell anybody who is trying to see what they can grow in their area, is go and have a look at what is growing in the wild, in a woodland or something like that, similar conditions to what you're trying to grow in. And then you can use the species that are growing there, go and find them in your local plant centre, but they will be garden varieties of those species, and that's usually the best way of finding things that will survive and grow really well. Lupins are brilliant from seed. Other things would be Silphium, Coreopsis, Verbascum. Those are a few suggestions that I can think of. Right, this one is, I love your videos. My question is, may I please ask a few recommendations regarding plants that can tolerate dog trampling and dog pee? Well, dog pee is not good for plants. Basically, it is high in salts and makes it a very salty situation, which means that the plants can't absorb the nutrients that they really need. Now, the best thing to prevent dogs coming in, if you're on a sidewalk or something like that, then you need to put a little bit of a physical barrier there, perhaps. That might not be possible, but that would be my first thing. There are things which dogs don't like, so things which have got tough leaves and thorns is one solution. But obviously, if you've got people walking along and passing and allowing their dogs to go in, then you've really got to put a deterrent. There are, however, a few plants which are supposed to be, now this is in people saying that these ones are more tolerant to dog pee, and that is hardy geraniums, Stachys byzantina, Osmanthus burkwoodii, which is a shrub, Cerastium tomentosum. Those are things which are tolerant. Now, being tolerant doesn't mean to say that they're going to survive all the time, but I think your best bet is to try and put in things which have got, as I say, much bigger leathery leaves which don't get damaged so much, and also things which might have a little bit of prickliness to them, therefore it stops the dogs going in. So things like berberis and mahonia might also be an option for you. Rosy, I'm living in Belgium and would like to know when the best time to start petunia. My last frost is the end of April. And second question is about blue globe plant and can the seeds be sown now? Right, okay. So you're in Belgium, similar sort of area to us, but it's all about light levels when you're sowing seed, especially something like petunia. So if the light levels don't improve until a little bit later and you're wanting to sow your petunias inside, I would leave it probably until about April to do that. If you're sowing in a cold frame, then again you're going to have to leave it until April. They'll soon catch up, and you want to be sowing in batches so that if your first batch doesn't do very well, a second batch will do much better. It's always a good idea to put in at least 2 or 3 batches a week to 10 days apart, so that you then get a good number of plants coming through. As with Echinacea, which is the blue globe thistle that you're talking about, that can be sown now. Yes, absolutely. Or if you're collecting it later on in the autumn, you can sow it in a cold frame for overwintering and then pricking it out in the spring. I hope that helps you. Someone here is wanting to know tall flowering perennials for part sun container gardens. Well, there are lots of things that you can utilise. A lot of tall herbaceous perennials quite happy in a container as long as you feed them and water them. So off the top of my head, I've got Miscanthus malapartus, beautiful grass, Veronicastrum virginicum album, and Helenium daubrunner. Just a few there. Hopefully that helps. Hello Rosie, would advise for leggy seedlings. I've been putting the seedling further down when transferring from seed tray to pot, but not sure if this is the best idea in every case. This sounds like you are setting your seed far too early when the light levels are not high enough, and therefore they are getting very etiolated. That is stretching. Better to do them slightly later. Anything that you sow later will always catch up. Sowing early does not mean you'll get an early crop. So try and sow a little bit later. Maybe use some artificial lights as well. That will help. Yes, you can put them slightly lower when you pot them up, but also the other thing is, don't allow them to get leggy. Pinch them out much earlier. And this is what a lot of people do. They go and leave them and leave them and leave them, and they get leggier. If you pinch them out really early, as soon as they germinate, that will be much better for them. So hopefully that will help you. If you're finding that you're always getting leggy seedlings, then change where you are putting them in a greenhouse, or if you're putting them in the house, give them more light, do them slightly later, start sowing later, you'll get much better seedlings from that. Hi Rosie, hope you can answer my question about plant names. Why do some plant names have multiple names or synonyms? I'm not talking about common names, but the specific cultivar. For example, Sedum autumn joy is also known as Herbsfreud. Buddleia silver anniversary is also known as morning mist. How and why does this happen? Isn't the name chosen by the original breeder? I've been caught out by this several times and ended up spending more money because I've bought the same thing over again. Right, these changes are twofold. Firstly, the original name is now being used instead of the anglicised name. So for instance, it was always Sedum Herbsfreud, but we called it Autumn Joy because that was much easier for us. It has gone back to its original, and Sedum is now Heucherella, so it is Heucherella Herbsfreud. That is one way. Also the same is Penstemon Andenicum de Haan. That always was Garnet. It is now Andenicum de Haan because that is the original naming. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that in different countries, the original name was not liked. So therefore it wasn't a name that sold well somewhere. And so it was basically changed for a selling name. And this is what happened with Silver Anniversary and Morning Mist. They are interchangeable like that. And there are quite a few that do have that happening. It's very difficult because you will get people who have printed labels and they will use one name because they like it and then the other one. It's not how it should be. You can check by going onto the RHS plant finder and you will find those being sorted out. But it will happen because you may find that the American names are different to the English names. The European names are different to the English names as well. Sorry, I can't be more specific, but that is the reason behind what happens. Hello, I live in a desert zone 8 in California. My question is, can I manipulate my Gaura? I plan to sow it from seed. I want some of them to be lovely, tall and wispy, and some to be shorter and more bushy. So yeah, absolutely. It is perfectly possible to manipulate in whichever way you want to do. Gaura is one of the ones that has changed its name to Oenothera. So when you grow it from seedling, you can pinch out hard. That will encourage more branching on your plant. And then throughout the year, you can just prune them back and cut them, and some will become bushy and some will just be much taller. So if you don't pinch out some, they should be much more leggy and wispy, and if you cut back and pinch the others, you will get a much lower growing, and they won't object to being cut back. You will also find that if you do them from seed, you will get a little bit of slight seedling variation, so some will typically be shrubbier and some will typically be more wispy as well. I hope that's helped you. Thank you very much for listening, and please do subscribe to the channel.